Exactly.
I told their story in 3 books. We began with the red pyramid.
It's like one of the best books. Trying to.
Cards say he wrapped up in day with the serpent's shadow. I love that series. It's so much fun. I also, however, admit that a lot of you guys weren't quite ready to say goodbye to Percy Jackson's world. You wanted to hear more about that. I didn't blame you. I had a lot of different mythologies I wanted to cover that I didn't get into the original Percy series. I was curious what would happen with Percy next as well. But I didn't want to do just the same old thing over and over. I didn't want to make continuations of Percy like Percy Jackson 17, Percy Jackson 35, Percy Jackson 265. Here comes the Minotaur again. Because I feel like if I did that, I would get bored, and if I'm bored, the writing wouldn't be as good, and then you guys would get bored too, and that's no good. So I started thinking, how can I go back to Camp Half-Blood? But you there was a Greek version of the gods and a Roman version of the gods. 2 camps, Camp Half-Blood and another camp, a Roman camp. And they didn't know about each other. What if they found out about each other? Would that be really good?
That'd be excellent.
And so, I made up a story about a different demigod named Jason Grace. But he's clearly a demigod. He has fabulous powers. He goes to Camp Half-Blood, yet he seems to be better at Latin than he is with Greek. He has these tattoos on his forearm. It's an SPQR, which is Roman. And they can't figure out who he is. Eventually, of course, we find out that he's a Roman demigod in the wrong camp, and things get very complicated. That story was The Lost Hero. You're telling me you want to ride off and save the world on Happy with Drag. And then it's like, yeah. So when I was thinking about ideas for the name of the book, which by the way, I always do that last when I come up with the title, I was talking to my sons in the daily bathroom and I said, all right guys, what do you think? I'm thinking about calling it The Lost Hero. And they both got a grin on their face and said, no Dad, you need to call the book Happy the Dragon's Magical Adventure. Yeah, no, I'm going to stick with The Lost Hero.
That was awesome.
In the second book, we go back to our old friend Percy Jackson. He wakes up in the Roman camp and has no idea who he is or what he's doing there. And that second book was his son. John Rothbard did it, so he has Percy bursting forth from Glacier Bay in Alaska with a Roman eagle. And he's ready to go. And my ever-helpful sons looked at this and namely said, you can't do that, Dad. That's a total spoiler. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, now I know that somewhere in the book, Percy gets a chicken on a stick. He wanted me to name it that. He rolls and rolls, roll two, chicken on a stick. I didn't know that. Well, speaking of my son, Haley, we started the whole thing out. Just this summer, we got to do an interesting project together called the Demigod Tiger. And some of these were stories that I've wanted to that Haley during this time has gone from a little kid who does not like to read and can barely get through a book to somebody who's doing great in school and actually has decided he wants to be a writer. I didn't put any pressure on him for that. I had no expectations that he would do that. I didn't even know he was thinking about it until one day he walked into my office and he said, "Hey, Dad, I just finished my first draft of the manuscript." I'm like, "What? Manuscript?" He said, "Yeah, my first book, you know, it's 700 pages." I was like, "That's longer than anything I've read." He said, "I know." So now he's revising it, getting it ready, you know, to go off to the publishers and all that. And so I said, when I was writing the Demigod Diaries, I said, "Well, you know, I have space for one more story. And I know you're writing your own books now, and since you kind of inspired the whole Percy Jackson series, would you be interested in like trying your hand at something from Percy's world and writing your own story about his world?" And to my surprise, he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take that on." And so he wrote the first story. And, well, in fact, for the very first time, he's here with me on tour. Would you like to meet him?
Some of you are holding vouchers for the book right now.